And now we have discussion time. Okay, Wai Ping, have
Thanks very much. I'd like to say a big thank you to all the speakers for presentations this morning. I enjoyed them tremendously. I just wanted to make an observation. This is not really not a question, but an observation about the interconnections, the interpenetrations between the four presentations, which will kick off the conversation. I think the point Victor is trying to make are brought out in fresh and surprising context in the other three presentations. For example, in Gladys' presentation, we see very clearly the danger of using this notion of commonality as a political ploy. So I think that connects very well to Victor's point about this this illusion about commonality, and in Simon's presentation, I think he talked very eloquently about this connection between a tree and a sheet of paper, and I'm reminded of the very perceptive comment made by Chu Yat Hong at the beginning of the introduction to the Heart Sutra, where he very poetically suggests that if you're a poet enough, you should be able to see a cloud hovering above the sheet of paper, because without cloud there won't be rain, without rain there won't be trees, and without trees there won't be sheet of paper. So I think that is brought out very eloquently in Simon's presentation. And then in Casey's presentation, I see. I'm not sure if you agree about this. I think the interconnection, the tension between superstructure and infrastructure is actually written very powerfully in terms of the interaction between the sentient and the non-sentient, which was discussed very eloquently in Victor's paper. And so and also this also connects to the tension between affect and emotion. So these are just some observations that I'd like to make just to kick off the conversation. Yeah. Again, thanks very much. I'm not sure if any of the speakers would like to respond to these.
Shall we start with Victor? Do you have anything to respond?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I was so excited to hear everyone's presentation, because I think Gladys one, and definitely the idea of like the critique of commonality and the idea of like how on the ground, how these effective connections have been organized, designed. I mean, I keep using the word design because Adam Nozick talks about design, not necessarily about someone designing it, but precisely how the interrelationships between people somehow organizing that design. And it's really fascinating. Like, I was really attracted to that project. I would love to see experience those mushrooms, maybe with unwanted mushrooms. But Simon, yeah, I also love the fact that when you're talking about the history, I mean, that's such a beautiful reading, close reading of the short story. Is it a short story? Or yeah, because it really inspires me to think about when we're looking at the wallpaper, or when I'm using a notebook. I mean, I've decided not to use the computer and use a notebook, but not only the fact that I'm inscribing something on the notebook, I also need to think closely about how each piece of paper is already a description of likes of different basically a cosmic assemblage of interdependencies. And KC, again, like, I love the fact that once again with the brain, you're giving us such concrete idea, and your project, I love Yellow Thing's idea of the infrastructure and superstructure. And I think this is so much part of the debate in the ecology debate, thinking about exactly, because infrastructure is something that underdetermines, something that is the underlying affective current. And so the idea is that there, on the one hand, there is that, as Casey says, this superstructure, this authoritarian gesture, well, more than gesture, design. But on the other hand, there is also this infrastructural current. Exactly when affects are being mediated, circulated, how are they being instantiated individually? And it's wonderful when you talk about the fact that when the trees are being redesigned, on the one hand, yes, ideally, every tree is supposed to instantiate the superstructure, something sufficient of nation state. But at the same time, it is a conglomeration of so many different agencies, so many actors who have their own ideas, who have their own interests. So basically, yeah, I just want to say that I'm just inspired by. It's such an exciting way that I'm just so inspired by everyone's project. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to say one thing about Simon's paper. I think a very, very important, very interesting point that has been raised about compassion. I mean, in Victor's paper, I mean, we see this emphasis on the continuous transformation of interbeings. And I think that Simon's paper brings up very, very clearly the role of compassion in the framework that you've been talking about. So I think, of course, the points we're trying to make has different important ramifications. In political context, in ethical context, and also in the collective identity of the nation, so on and so forth. So I think that's a different point I forgot to make about this. Thanks for the compassion.
Yes, please.
And the other one paper, there's one when Simon was giving that paper, the very powerful image in the story came to mind. She was writing. One of the things that the only thing she could do was she was ferociously writing on her diary book. So it's a one broken body pouring herself out onto another broken body. And I never thought about it that way, but when you were giving a paper, that became an extremely moving and powerful image to me, as effectively powerful as the Nissan ad yesterday we saw.
Yes, Simon, you go first. Yeah.
Victor, one of the things I enjoyed your talk very much. One of the things I didn't hear you mention, or one of the people I didn't hear you mention, maybe I was, I don't know, tired, was Bruno Latour.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I wonder if you might say a few words.
Passed away.
No,
Actor network theory and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because does it actually, Latour is not one of those people, one of the scholars we haven't really taken a lot of time to look into it, because this whole piece of research actually came out of the pandemic. I was working on the Buddhism book, and I was thinking a little bit about what comes next after the Buddhism book, because the Buddhism book does touch upon political ethics and things like that, but this was pandemic. And so I was reading a lot of works with Tom Lamar, Adam Nozick, Deborah Levitt, and a lot of those people. And so some of these choices were actually quite underdetermined, to use that word, by Tom Lamar's personal preference. So you hear a lot of Simondon. At one point, we're really intensively thinking about William James. So Levitt, actually Levitt, Tom, and also Livia Monette and I were also thinking about Buddhism a lot. So in some ways, we're kind of forming that network. Latour, I do agree, it falls out of so as people like Badiou and also suddenly like my Levinas, like those people were kind of taken out of circulation for the time being. They will come back later, But for the time being, I'm really focusing on the lineage from like Kantian, Foucault, and basically reading Foucault is one major thing, and how we can actually reevaluate Simondon. Because Simondon was very popular about 10 years ago to reevaluate Deleuze and Guattari. And now, like with the rereading Deleuze and Guattari through Simondon, can we push Simondon a little bit further in the concerns? Yeah, so I think the work group has been, we have been in pause. I think Tom went to talk about plant consciousness last year in Switzerland. So that was a major thing that he has been working on. And this year we are thinking about sun consciousness, like things like that. So we are actually thinking in those terms to try to push further the like anthropotechnics question. I mean, of course, Stiegler and Sloterdijk were the other two people. And then on my part, I kind of keep trying to bring up people like Fan Dongmei a lot. So those are the people, like, so I really do apologize. Like, I really don't, this is, Latour is someone I haven't really invested in that time.
I just want to follow up on that. Within the concept of perspectivism, the notion of multiple ontologies raised by Vivian de Castro, and the way indigenous people, have this notion like different creatures, they also have their own words. So I wonder whether that come across as a perspective.
Yeah, I would say we were trying to be careful, because I think in the Buddhism book, I try, and Tom and I actually hates me for doing that. The idea is just I actually put in, I say, well, there is ontology, but ontology is in Buddhist terms, it's called pamancha. And pancha is like it's usually being translated into perceptual conceptual proliferation. So, so I'm saying that if you follow Yogacara Buddhism, ontology is important, but ontology is still ultimately entityless. So I think one thing to think about multiple ontology, there are, I wouldn't say two levels, because the two levels are the same level, but the idea is that in the Buddhism book, I still keep using the term ontology. And also the admission of like multiple ontologies or ontologies is as a kind of phosphorus kind of dialogue. But if we really follow that line of thinking with Buddhism and also with Simondon, then we really can't say that there is such a thing as ontology, because there is also only ontogenesis, right, like the Simondon. And that is something that even in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, you would notice that in the beginning, in his earlier works, he allows the word ontology.
I find that quite confronting, because I work at the intersection of social justice and environmental justice. To have this notion of interconnectedness, we know in eco-materialism, such as toxic intimacies, the migrant workers and factories and mines and bodies being toxified and corroded. So in that sense, everything is connected. But how the sense of ethics come in to play with this notion? Like how can the powerful change the inequality?
Right. So two things I think. One thing to think about that is that there are two ways to think about it. One thing to think about it is more grounded in the way the compassion is a major issue. The idea is that because in Buddhism there are four stages, right? 4 stages of benevolence, and so in Chinese, 慈悲, 喜舍. And so 慈 refers to empathy. So it's almost like the first step, and it's incomplete. Because empathy still clings onto the notion of the existence of the self and the existence of the other, and the discrimination between the two. Bei refers to compassion. compassion isn't totally free, but the idea is that I am mindful of the attachment. But now I am compassion on compassion, feeling with the other, feeling together. Pathos, having that pathos with other people. Avalokiteshvara, Guan Yin, is always being considered a bodhisattva of compassion. But the idea is that they have compassion. So once again, like I always say, Avalokiteshvara in Chinese culture is always she, but it should be they. But the idea is that like Avalokiteshvara has compassion when they deal with an interrelation or the interrelation. But that compassion is still has an attachment to the discrimination between the self and the other. But the idea is that they have compassion because they can also see, or they are also mindful of the fact that that discrimination is entityless. There is no fundamental existential value. So that discrimination itself is meaningless on the one hand, is meaningful. So the idea is that the easiest way to think about it is the Diamond Sutra. If I give you a gift, so the Diamond Sutra is saying, is there a giver? Yeah, there is a giver. I'm giving you a gift. Is there a receiver? Yeah, there is a receiver. Is there a gift in itself? There is a gift in itself. But the giver is an assemblage of conditions. So this giver has no entity, no self-nature. The receiver has no self-nature because you, as a receiver, is also an assemblage of conditions. And then is there a gift? This gift is also entityless. So the idea is that is there a giver, a receiver, and a gift? Yes. But the existence of the giver, the receiver, and the gift is a set of interrelationships which have no existential value. So if you use Zen Buddhism, so in Chinese translation is both problematic but also easy to understand. Highly problematic because Tibetan Buddhism hates the Chinese translation. 有我有你有彼，但这个有是空的，所以你说没有吗？不是没有啊，是真的有。
Like the airplane.
但是真的空吗？也不是真的空，因为如果我们说真的空的话，表示没有啊，你不存在了，但是你是存在的。
Yeah, I do.
你是存在是有还是没有呢？这个不要答。你答出来的时候就是有偏有，你答不出来就是偏空。所以你
Mushroom cloud.
所以有还是无都是 proliferation.
Well,
The
can
moment
you-
we cling on to existence or non-existence, then we are talking about a perceptual conceptual proliferation. So do we have morals? We have to have morals. We have to have ethics because ethics allow us to take care of the world as we understand it. But ethics is part of how we take care of everything. But yes, ethics is empty, but it doesn't mean that it's meaningless because the emptiness is actually manifested as everything. So if we cannot go in, that's the difference between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. In Theravada Buddhism, the idea is that I go into emptiness. That's it, I'm happy. Well, I'm not saying that that's really but Mahayana Buddhism is to say that you can't escape into emptiness because there is no such thing as emptiness. This is emptiness. And that's why we have to be ethical.
Anyone else have a burgeoning question? We keep
Yeah,
discussing during the lunchtime. Yeah, Homi.
All right, so yeah, just some reflections on the short question. I have very limited knowledge of Buddhism, but I just wonder if you know Cha Zhang, who actually is working at Kuni Brooklyn, who is actually practicing, Buddhism and associates the ideas of Buddhism with eco-criticism. So I don't think I understand what she's doing, but she's working on the topic which is closely associated into yours, and I think she's particularly focusing on Wei Shizong. Yeah, so just for your information.
Casey, do you have anything to respond?
I guess the notion of common is a really kind of, I won't say it's rhetorical. Somehow it's a good concept to mobilize people to advance for a certain agenda, right? So because even though the notion of common invite for multiple or even conflicting interpretations but this is definitely a kind of force that can generate certain kind of momentum for the community that we want to spread this message for. So I guess my approach to this common is try to look at it from the so-called top-down perspective, right?
Yeah.
So and then the way how they try to so-called rejuvenate, so to speak, the nation by building, by kind of restorating the dead idea of utopia, the socialist utopia, the common happiness, even though but somehow they already have an agenda for that. Well, the common for them is not necessarily like the kind of will of the revolutionary era. Okay, leveling everything. Everyone have the equal share. No way. Well, there's no going backward. Now they talk about that's another return. The only return to the so-called natural order. As far as they understood, even though we may not necessarily have a full comprehension of what natural order means for. The natural orders mean, the hierarchy is there. Every kind of transformations goes through a certain kind of graduate process gradations. So you cannot expect the ideal world would arrive immediately. Wait, be patient, even though you have to tolerate all the sufferings, inequality, injustice along the way. But there's a future waiting for you, a bright future waiting for you. So that's the way how I interpret it through the examinations of this new utopian city, so to speak.
Simone.
I'm not sure it's a question so much as a response to with two Korean examples that I think about when you were talking about this place. One is the stream called Cheonggyecheon, which has become famous in Seoul, which was fiercely resisted by the people. And the president, Lee Myung-bak, who's currently in jail, and I think going to stay there for a while, pushed it through, and it became this really idyllic, beautiful part of the city that used to be covered over with cement. And now, people flock there and they go there. I've gone there myself. But like the stereogram, it isn't entirely what it seems. My taxes, and I pay very high taxes in Korea, go to fund that because the water in the stream is actually pumped in and it's going the opposite direction than it was originally going. And what the, and it's got fish in it and they're all swimming the wrong way, because the stream is going that way and it's supposed to be going that way. I don't know really what I'm saying, but it was triggered by what you were saying. The other thing, less of a failure, is Songdo, which is this utopian city near Incheon that was built same style, with this sort of top down. And I've been there. It's great. I love it. I would love to live there. So I guess I shouldn't say that. But
Yeah.
So I don't know. Another thing that I was thinking of with this place is when you were talking, I Googled it, and it's not high above sea level. And then as soon as I was Googling that, you started talking about how it's so sort of wetlands area along natural. It seems to me that, if we're facing, one of the words in the title of the symposium is climate change. We're facing rising sea levels. I mean, extraordinary rising sea levels. That whole ideal city is going to be underwater. And so I wonder, what kinds of, as Sondo will be, by the way, I mean, because it's right at sea level. I mean, it is right at sea level and it's on reclaimed land. They spent 2 decades reclaiming it and pile driving it. It's great, love to live there, but not for very long. So
It's only the political will to restore so-called the ecosystem. In fact, for decades, there have been debates on whether that kind of the wetland worth saving, because they keep losing water and quality is kind of deteriorating. So people think naturally the wetland would vanish in the future. But why spend so much money and use even pump the fresh water from south, I guess, the South North water transfer, right? We know about that mega project waste a lot of water to pump it into that wetland in order to make it more beautiful. Now to make it to restore it so-called, but it may not worth restoring. I mean, from the so-called scientific perspective, it's only the political will drive that kind of restoration project.
I just want to quickly pass a comment because I know we are ready for lunch. Just about Gladys and Casey's, I think your work really comes into dialogue. If I could ask more questions as a method of commenting and have summarized some, I think, questions, but also binary pairs to further think about the question of ecological civilization. And the first pair is this idea invites so many interpretations, and of course, it is so easily for people to brush it away. I think it's also more productive for us to think about it more. So the first pair is it eco-socialism or is it eco-modernization? The second pair is it domestic dream or, and you can further, sort of challenge the binary pairs that I posed here, or international and global destiny and strategy. So here the question, civilization for whom? Civilization by whom? And the third one, is it environmental authoritarianism or authoritarian environmentalism? And the fourth one is a commonly asked question is of the question of degrowth. I think the common question being asked as a critique of this notion or ideal. Is it degrowth, or when does degrowth come in, or is it green packaging for the purpose of developing, right? And a last question is about technology. And Casey also mentioned this ecological, eco-technological ideal. So this idea about fixing the problem caused by technology with more technology, and how will that work out? And so, yeah. So just some final thoughts about your tools project.
Thanks for the comment. I work on that with this.
Yeah.
I guess people are starving.
Nature calls, yeah.
I think Casey has made a very thoughtful response to that.
Yeah, our belly calls. Yeah. Do you have any quick?
Thinking ecological.
Yeah.
Thinking in terms of ecosystem.
So do you have any quick concluding remarks?
I guess for some of them are kind of binary, but they are not necessarily understood as such, I guess. Well, some actually what could be two sides of the same thing, like eco-socialism and eco-modernization. I think all socialists claim that they are not traditions. They are always kind of even high modernists, right? Kind of so I guess for your first pair, they are not necessarily in opposition. So maybe I the past the coming words.
I would say that it's more than didactic. Like, there's some continuity among the two, so they are not extremes in a sense. So they are all, in a way, they are all co-producing each other
Yeah.
in an extra way.
For lunch.
Yes, well, it's just waiting for us. Well, thank you.